Welcome to the Beyond Fat Loss podcast, where we don't just stop at fat loss, you'll learn about all the good stuff that follows: how to build more muscle, how to enjoy more food, and how to stay lean without going to extremes. We are your hosts, Sean and Katie, and today we're back with part 2 of our client scenarios episode. Last week, we discussed some tricky client scenarios, and we tried our very best to stitch each other up, challenging each other to describe how we would help to resolve some difficult challenges which a client may face.
I really loved last week's episode, actually. I really enjoyed going into the depths of the individual scenarios that are slightly nuanced, slightly different, slightly a lot more in depth than, just some generic advice that's out there on social media. And beforehand, I gotta be honest, I was thinking, God, how's Sean going to stitch me up now? He's going to just know how to pull a wild card question out of the deck. Weirdly, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed putting my brain into action and describing the real life scenarios that we help people with.
To be fair, you did a great job, but it's part 2 now. I got another scenario coming your way today, so there's still time to mess it up. Don't worry, Katie.
I might be trying to shove those words back in my mouth in a couple of minutes and regret everything I've just said.
That being said, though, you have got a bit more energy this week. You've got a little bit more cognitive function this week, haven't you? Because you are currently in a diet break from your aggressive diet. Am I right?
I am, and it's a very nice place to be.
So absolutely no excuses for slipping up then.
That's not quite what I said. And I beg to differ. Now my mind is full of energy again. It might just be hard to tame the thought processes and then come up with a coherent answer. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit easier when you literally can only get one thing on your mind at a time, because that's all your brain can tolerate, to just come out with the one answer that comes to mind.
I'll have decisions to make today.
Well, I've got bad news for you, Katie. I finished the last podcast with my scenario. So you know what that means?
You have thought about the plan and structure of this quite
You're
well,
up
haven't you?
first. You're up first again.
But before we go into the first scenario today, we're very grateful for everyone who listens into the podcast and the feedback that we've had back. It really does put a smile on our face. It's awesome to hear that it's having such an impact on so many lives already. To spread the good word, to get our support and help out to other people, we'd very much appreciate your help with that. Whether that's dropping a like or a follow or subscribe, depending on what platform you were listening to us on, or even just share it with a friend or family member that you think could benefit from it. We would very, very much appreciate that.
Especially in today's day and age where fitness is becoming more and more impersonal. We feel like the way that people are using AI to solve most of their problems nowadays, the way that the vast majority of fitness content creators are all just copying one another or doing reaction videos to everyone else's videos. We do firmly believe that nothing will ever replace good coaching, good critical thinking skills, and actually just having relationships with real people. Doesn't matter how advanced you are in your lifting journey. It doesn't matter whether you're aiming to jump on stage as a bodybuilder or whether you're just looking to lose a few pounds. Having that relationship, that connection, and actually having a real human being that can empathize with you, can understand your struggles, and can support you through those struggles just on the other side of a phone or on the other side of a mic is such a huge, huge benefit to you in this fitness journey. So yeah, we would really appreciate it. It's one of our main motivators for doing this podcast, is to let you know a little bit more about the real people behind fitness coaching, and not just what you see online, which is overdone, it's over flashy. A lot of it's just copy and pasted or built using AI nowadays. Let's be honest.
Definitely. I think it's really important to not lose the human connection with everything in life, really, but obviously in our particular interest in the health and fitness world. You can never underestimate the environment that you're in, the community that you're around, what impact that will actually have on you as an individual, but also the goals that you achieve. And I think putting yourself in the right space and in the right environment, absorbing the information that's going to help you, challenge your mindset in a good way, you just can't underestimate how important that is.
And I don't know about you, Katie, but I'll speak on behalf of my clients. The ones that listen to this podcast on a weekly basis, despite the fact they've worked with me, some of them 6 months, 12 months, some of them have worked with me nearly 2 years now. Those that are listening to this podcast on a regular basis are making further improvements again, be it decision-making skills, be it having a little bit more of a dialed-in attitude towards what they really want to achieve and what really matters to them when it comes to pursuing certain fitness goals or fitness targets, how they handle themselves in certain environments, and how they handle certain conversations with family members, friends, other people around them. I'm seeing improvements in all of those aspects. I'm seeing behavior change and habit change beyond what they were currently doing. And some of them were already doing a really good job. And that to me doesn't necessarily confirm how awesome we are. It's more a case that when you're in the right environment and you have repetition with what you're learning that provides you with positive, can-do solutions to things, you do tend to elevate yourself more, and you do tend to feel more comfortable challenging yourself more, and you feel hungrier to try and improve and develop. It's almost infectious in that environment. So it wasn't the main reason for us starting this podcast, but it's amazing to see how much of an impact it's having on people that we're working with on a one-to-one basis as well. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's all the more reason to want to share that with somebody and to continue coming back and listening to this as well.
Absolutely, I agree, Sean. And I've got to be honest, even if we weren't doing this for the public now, I would still want to do this week in, week out for our private community. Because I think the benefit to having this is been huge. I think there's only so much you can tackle in one moment at a time. And the more exposure you can get to sometimes different ways of looking at a certain problem is really helpful. And I think also you can listen to, for example, this podcast today, but you could listen to it again in 6 months, 12 months time and take something different away from it because you're on a different part of your journey, or perhaps you've solved part A of what we're going to talk about, and part B isn't really relevant to you right now, but it could be relevant to you at a different time. I think that stands for all of the podcasts that we've done. When you go through a journey and you get more experienced, there's elements when you're learning that you don't even take in because it's so new to you. But you listen to that podcast again in 6 months into journey or 12 months into journey, you're like, that really makes sense now. And then you start embedding those even more, and everything start kind of that light bulb moment just keeps happening and happening and happening.
Yeah, these podcasts will be here forever. But again, I'll talk from my experience. I listen to a few podcasts each week, and I actually take certain segments away from the podcast, and I listen to that same segment 3, 4 times sometimes. And I sit down and I make notes on that particular segment. If it's something that's really important and valuable to me at this particular stage of my journey, or if it's something that I really want to learn and educate myself on, I will go back over that. The advantage of podcasts nowadays, you get timestamps on them. You can easily use AI to help you with collecting your notes and putting your notes together. That's one of the great uses for it. Like one thing that I did, and just a quick tip for anyone listening, I recorded the podcast while it was playing. So I had like a voice memo on my phone of a segment of a podcast. I then transcribed it and I asked AI to condense it down into notes so that I had a shortened, quick snippet version of that, which then I could rewrite in my own words if I wanted to, put in a document somewhere, and I've learned something from that podcast. So just a quick bit of housekeeping in terms of note taking there. But yeah, use a podcast to your advantage, and there may be a particular segment that stands out to you that it's like, right, this is absolutely something that I need to go over and I need to learn. Why not listen back to it a few times? Why not make some notes on it when you've got 5-10 minutes and sit down and get some valuable tips to action moving forwards? Because it's all well and good listening to podcasts, right? It's all well and good doing that, but it can become a procrastination tool. You can listen to all the podcasts in the world. You can acquire all the information and all the learning points in the world. But if you're not putting the learning points into action and you're not using them to facilitate change, and you're not going to get outcomes from it. You need to put this stuff into action and need to do the work with it when you learn these things as well.
No, it's so true. I had that conversation with a client this week, actually. Enjoying everything she's learning in the community library in the app. She's loving the podcast, getting a lot away from it, and she's so hungry to do more and more and more of it. I just had to say, I actually do not want you to listen to them all and go through everything right now. I just want you to pick one a week, take something away from it that you can apply, and then apply it. Because like you said, Sean, you can keep absorbing information, but you can also hide behind just listening to podcasts rather than actioning the things that you're learning. And that's the part that's going to make you feel really empowered, is when you start doing the actions that you're learning and you start seeing changes in your day to day.
100%. These podcasts will always be here. If you can't listen to them as quickly as we're releasing them because you're busy actioning stuff, then we'd rather that than you just listen to 4 or 5 podcasts in a row, but not actually do anything with the information in those podcasts. So yeah, that's our little what to do with the podcast segment then.
Yeah, a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. And I think the last thing I'd like to mention before we go on to the first scenario is we would be happy to have a chat with any of you if you have any questions, or if you've taken a piece of advice and think, I want to apply this, I'm not quite sure how I should do it, or if it's relevant for me right now, then pop one of us a message. We absolutely love chatting about everything to do with health and fitness. So you won't be disturbing us. We'd welcome it. You can find us on Instagram at KTSKD Coaching or Sean SKD Coaching. Pop us a message on there, drop us a follow, and we'd be more than happy to have a chat with you.
Absolutely. Katie,
Oh, wait, just one more thing.
enough of the procrastination now. It's time for your scenario. So the scenario I'm going to present you with first this morning. Client has been doing a balanced build phase for around 3 months, but they're feeling increasingly uncomfortable with their body. They send you this message. I'm a bit worried I'm gaining more fat than I'd like. I'm feeling very meh. I look fluffy. My clothes are all super tight on me. I'm starting to feel a bit uncomfortable in myself, but I don't want to quit this build phase early. What do you do with that?
Ooh. Before I deep dive what we call the investigation phase, where we kind of have a look at all of the data and weigh things up, it's not uncommon to feel, I'd just like to make the listeners aware, it's not uncommon to feel a little bit fluffier around the edges when you're in a building phase. Doesn't always mean that you are gaining body fat too quickly. It could be a sign that you're gaining body fat too quickly, and we'll chat about that in a moment, but it's not always the case. And depending on the rate of gain that you were comfortable with, that you are striving for, you're going to expect to gain a little bit of body fat along the process. Is that always a bad thing? No, it's not always a bad thing. And I think it's often a part of the process that is new to most people and can be difficult to get your head around, because most of the time you're striving for leaner, smaller, feeling trimmer. And going through your building phase, or first ever building phase perhaps, I've made a massive assumption now that this is that person's first building phase, right? But given that it's 3 months, that's where my assumption come from. But, you could do a 3-month balance, 3-month build at any part of your journey. But particularly if it's your first one, then that's a new experience to you, right? And that's getting used to, okay, is this normal? Should I be expecting this? Do I need to panic, or do I just need to keep trusting the process?
For sure. To add to that, I think it's worth noting that it's very, very rare that anybody does their first ever build phase and get it 100% spot on. This takes a bit of trial and error. It takes a bit of practice. I don't think there's a single coach on the planet, honestly, that is worth their salt that would say they can absolutely nail every single building phase with a client straight from the off and never find a way to improve it moving forward. If anybody says that and they're a coach, I think they're probably lying through their teeth, because everyone responds differently to being at maintenance calories or just slightly above, in terms of how their training needs to be managed, in terms of how their recovery goes, in terms of how much food they can actually tolerate. There's so many different variables that can affect how well a build phase goes. When you work with the same individual for a number of build phases and a number of cycles, it just keeps getting better and better and better and better every time. But the first few times you do those build phases, there will be things that you reflect on afterwards and go, right, I think I'm going to improve that next time. Sometimes that is a little bit of body fat gain. There are other scenarios where, and I've had this with certain clients, where their first build phase is far too conservative, where they're perhaps not eating enough calories, where we're not allowing their body weight or their body fat levels to go up a little bit. And when you see the progress of that build phase, you're looking at it and going, well, maybe one of the reasons why they didn't get as much out of this is because they perhaps weren't fueling well enough. In most cases, the reason why somebody doesn't build muscle comes down to training. It's the training that is the real driver of that. But it's something that you can reflect on after it and say, well, what can we improve on next time to give us the best possible chance to get the best results in this build phase? So I think it's incredibly common, perhaps more so with men than women, Katie. I think it's probably fair to say for build phases to go too far the other way, where you overeat in calories, you gain more fat proportionate to how much muscle you gain in that build phase. And that can leave you feeling quite uncomfortable. And this is something that you get better at doing over time. I've got better at doing this myself. My build phases now do not involve me gaining as much fat as my build phases of the past. And I don't see myself gaining any less muscle, and I'm getting stronger and stronger every single build phase I do. So the evidence suggests that I'm building more muscle with each building phase I do, but I'm not gaining as much fat with my more recent ones compared to my build phases in the past. So you do get better at this.
You do get better at them. And, the reality is it's not irreversible. You might feel a bit uncomfortable for a little while, but it's not going to take you to a point where you are so far out of reach. It's nothing's going to be solved with 2 or 3 cycles in a fat loss phase. That's the reality, right? Especially if you're working with a coach or even yourself. You know yourself when you're feeling a little bit more uncomfortable, probably carrying more body fat than you should expect to see when you start in a building phase. You're never going to be too far away. You're not going to be years away from dropping that body fat back down. At most, you might be a couple of cycles of fat loss, right? So in your grand scheme of your life, it's really not the end of the world. And I think a lot of us worry too much about gaining fat and not focusing enough on what you need to do day to day and your actions and your habits and behaviors to allow you to manage that. Because if you can nail those, body fat levels will look after themselves. They absolutely will. And I think that's where the focus should be more on, not don't want to gain fat or am I gaining fat too quickly? Because that will look after itself if you focus on the right things, right? You did mention that you see it more in men than women. I think it depends. I think it's more of some people are on the scale of they've undereaten most of their life and try to keep their body fat levels always low. And really fear gaining fat, and perhaps they don't, like you said, push it enough. And then you've got the other ones then that really find gaining fat quite easy, can overeat quite easily. And I think I see both of that in females. I obviously predominantly work with females. I see both ends of the spectrums with females on that. So yeah, I don't know if that is so much gender specific, but
You're right in what you're saying, and I would agree with you. I guess the angle that I'm looking at this from is that going back when I first started training, 10, 12 years ago, information wasn't quite as nuanced. It wasn't quite as well presented as what it is nowadays. And certainly in the male fitness space, we were presented with this narrative that you had to feed the build, you have to eat big to get big. And we were also seeing lots of enhanced bodybuilders with, I guess, artificially increased metabolic rates that were consuming ridiculous amounts of calories every single day and getting fed the narrative down the grapevine that we need to eat loads and loads of food in order to fuel muscle building. It's right to say that it's an energy intensive process, right? It does take energy. It does require you to maximize muscle building. You do require yourself to eat, maintenance calories or above, ideally just slightly above maintenance calories, right? But I think certainly coming from my perspective and from a lot of the guys that I started going to the gym with and grew up around, we were always fed the narrative that you have to eat more than what is necessary in order to build muscle. And that's why I make the comment of, it's more common for this to be male orientated, because I think we've got so accustomed to needing to do that.
that makes sense. That makes sense. And it's interesting actually. When we do these podcasts, I think sometimes what I find really interesting is that we do have different perspectives on it. And I can totally understand why you would say that about males. It's the bulking, isn't it? The building, and bulking was very much the only approach at one point to build muscle mass. I think I can speak for myself when it comes to bulking. When that was the main way to build muscle, that absolutely switched me right off from even wanting to try and build muscle, to the point where I didn't even try and do that for years, because I was like, I do not want to gain that body fat back. Like, hell no. So yeah, I understand where your thought process is going to that and the reasons behind it. Let's draw it back.
I actually think, having coached males and females, that a distinction which I have seen is that it's more common for females to unintentionally overeat and gain too much body fat when they're doing a building phase, because it's something that they haven't had a lot of practice and experience with. And it's difficult to control calorie intake for them without that experience. Whereas I think a lot of males will intentionally overconsume and intentionally overeat, thinking that is the way that they need to build muscle. So I think the distinction is sometimes the intent behind it. Both, of course, are due to lack of experience and perhaps some miseducation. But just the fact that you're mentioning that there, like, you can see my brain is thinking about different angles and different perspectives. And like you said, when we do these podcast discussions, sometimes you start talking about something, and then all of a sudden you start looking at different angles and different perspectives, and you can assess things from a slightly different lens. And I think that is quite valuable for us as well, doing these podcasts, Katie.
Yeah, I fully agree. This is what I said earlier on in the podcast. I've got to kind of put all of my thoughts back in the box sometimes, because there's lots whirling around in my mind right now about this conversation alone. But I don't want to go off too much on a side tangent. So I'm going to try and bring it back to the initial question that you asked me about the client scenario, them being in a 3-month build and they're feeling fluffy, a bit uncomfortable. So where would I take this now if I had that message from a client today? And the first point of call is I would assess the weight data and any trends that's happening with their weight data, not just from the last week, but from the start of their building phase, at the end of their last cut really, and start into the start of the building phase. Are they experiencing a normal amount of weight gain? And for this, it's usually around 0.1 to 0.2% of body weight gain per week. That doesn't always mean every week it go up by that amount, on average across the time. Am I seeing what I expect to see? Or has that shot up quite a bit?
So just for argument's sake, let's say you have a 200 pounds individual, you've been doing this for 10 weeks. They're looking at about a 2 pounds weight gain over those 10 weeks, total weight gain on average over those 10 weeks. So at most. So that's kind of roughly the ballpark we're looking at there?
It's not large numbers, right? Small increases. And just to iterate the point here, this is the averages now, the trend. It's not one individual way in here and there, because you probably will have some a little bit higher, you might have some a little bit lower throughout the time too, but it's the average over time. And are we seeing that kind of trend up at that slow, gradual rate? Or am I seeing on the scales, am I seeing in their data now that they're perhaps creeping up to the 205, 206, 207 range? Because if they are, then there's a strong chance that perhaps there's a bit too much body fat being gained, and that's contributing to why they're feeling a little bit fluffier, a little bit more uncomfortable in their clothes feeling a bit tighter at the moment.
When you got that weight data, what else do you do alongside that weight data then? So you might spot a certain trend, but how do you know that their weight is not going up at a rate that you would expect? Is there anything you would look for as a coach in that scenario?
For sure. So it's not, it's never just looking at that, the weight in any scenario when it comes to coaching. You also want to consider what their calorie intake has been like over the period of those 3 months. Has there been any changes, drastic changes higher in any of the weeks? But it's not even just the calories. It's also looking at their energy expenditure. So have they been as active as they normally are? Have they been doing as many steps as they normally do? Has their sleep been impacted over the last week? For example, if we see an elevated weigh-ins the last week, has their training dropped off in the gym, or is that still at a consistent amount of sessions a week? They're probably the main ones I would look at when it comes to assessing whether any changes in their lifestyle or their diet may be contributing to why we're seeing perhaps higher weigh-ins on the scales. Whether we can rule out, okay, the higher weigh-ins we're seeing at the moment, they're due to perhaps you being a bit more stressed. They're due to the fact that you had a really busy week last couple of weeks and your step count has dropped down by 10 to 20,000 a week. You also haven't been able to go to the gym. So, okay, perhaps we might need to recalibrate your calories a little bit to account for that right now. And perhaps you are feeling a little bit more fluffy than you'd like, but there's a reason for this. There's nothing to panic about. It's that, look, this has happened the last couple of weeks, and make some adjustments moving forward.
Yeah, because potentially this person is consuming more calories than intended than what they're actually burning every day, because activity levels have changed. So if their energy expenditure has gone down and then their calorie intake hasn't been adjusted for this, then naturally they're going to gain weight at a slightly increased rate and potentially some fat gain with that as a result of those changes in energy expenditure. Why are you looking at this weight data first and foremost before you make a decision with this individual? Why is that important, Katie?
If the weight data is going in a direction that I wouldn't expect to see, then that allows me as a coach to think about what possible scenarios in their life or in their nutrition that could be potentially something that I need to investigate further on. So like I mentioned, the activity just now, mentioned perhaps the gym sessions, stress, etc. But it could also flag up for me to have just a quick look at their nutrition. If they're tracking the calories, I can have a look at their tracker, because we do get complacent. We do kind of get into a groove where perhaps we aren't tracking things quite as accurately or missing things off the track when life gets stressful, or we get complacent with the journey. And sometimes we just need a reminder to tighten up on those things that could have been causing us to gain a little bit too much weight over the last couple of weeks, for example. And if that's the case, then that can be corrected pretty easily with some tightening up adjustments over the next couple of weeks. But also, if you have investigated those other elements and actually they're on point to exactly where they should be, so that person is tracking really accurately, they are weighing everything, their step count hasn't changed, they go into the gym consistently, it could be a sign that weight gain that they have and it isn't abnormal. What they are feeling in their body is just a natural part of the process when it comes to a balanced build, rather than it being excess body fat or too much body fat in comparison to the muscle mass that's being gained.
We'll come back to that body fat point in a minute, because I think that's so valuable and I think it's really important. Yeah, just what you were saying there. I mean, we are very data-led coaches, but for good reason, because data gives you options to explore things. Data gives you an opportunity to reflect. It can sometimes signal where you need to investigate a little bit further. I don't think that people use data as frequently when they're on their own, because it can be quite overwhelming and it's hard to know what to actually do with the data. It just seems like a load of numbers and a load of words which don't actually make sense. Uh, it's one of the advantages of having a coach, isn't it, Katie, to be able to look at your data and to make informed decisions about your data. It's why some of the best bodybuilders on the planet have their own coaches. It's why some of the best coaches have their own coaches, because it's one thing to know what to do when you're looking at somebody else's data, but knowing what to do with your own data sometimes, if you've got yourself into a sticky spot, can be really difficult. You sometimes don't you're sometimes emotionally attached to the data that you're looking at, and it's hard then to make objective, informed decisions about what to do with that data.
That's exactly it, Sean. It's you have that emotional tie. You might know the logistics behind it, but you might not. Your mind might not be open to seeing them, spotting them, and dealing with them on your own. And that's quite natural and normal as a human being.
Yeah, and sometimes like problems with a data set can be solved very easily by just some reassurance, by somebody just having a second pair of eyes on it and looking at it and saying, actually, no, this is what we would expect to see. And those terms for me are really important. Like, what is the predicted outcome? And what is the observed outcome? So, if you predict weight to go up by a certain amount each week for an individual, but what you actually see is vastly different, then there might need to be some sort of conversation about that and some further investigation about why that is the case. Perhaps there's a problem with the method. Perhaps the calories are set too high. Perhaps the activity levels have changed, as we discussed. The predicted and the observed are not too far away. Then sometimes you just need a reminder that this is quite normal, that it's quite common. Nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect. Nothing's ever going to go 100% to plan. Like, there's going to be a degree of variability in everyone's results. You'll never have a perfect data set that correlates perfectly towards the visual outcomes that you see. That said, I'm a massive fan of using data collection, but it's also important to move beyond just looking at numbers and facts and figures. And in this case scenario, the client is expressing some dissatisfaction and discomfort with their appearance. They may not be looking at it objectively at this stage, so it's important to get some objective feedback as well.
I agree fully. I think that objective feedback is really important, especially because if you are perhaps seeing some higher numbers on the scale, for example, right, that could influence how you are thinking about your body shape, how you see yourself, especially if you have struggled with your body image for a vast majority of your life. So what you're actually seeing and what your mind's telling you you're seeing compared to what's actually happening could be very different.
It's confirmation bias at that stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see an increasing number, therefore you think that you're increasing in size as a result. And I think this is one of the real issues, and it's something that I really want to emphasize. Weight gain and body fat gain are not the same thing. And I think it's one of the biggest problems which people experience when it comes to going into a building phase is they automatically assume that any increases on the scales mean they're getting fat. And they might look at themselves on one day where they might be a little bit more bloated. It might be around time of the month for females. It might be after a really salty or carb heavy meal the night before, after a poor night's sleep. And they'll go, my God, yeah, but 2-3 pound weight increase. I'm getting fat. I've got fat overnight.
And what happens then, Sean, right, is not that it's not even just that initial moment, is it? It's then, well, it's going backwards, so F it. I'm now then going to go and, perhaps eat more than I would have normally done. My habits to go to pot because of this, because of these thoughts you have in your mind, which aren't actually marrying up to what's really happening.
If you soothe through food, if you're the type of individual where you look to provide yourself with emotional comfort through food, then you can end up in this scenario where you see a really high weigh-in on the scales, you're not feeling your best on that particular day, you then comfort eat through food, which then means that the next day after that, you have an inflated weigh-in again, and now you're starting to feel like a bit of a failure because one-off occasion, you might be able to scratch that off and move forwards. Now you've seen it 2-3 days in a row. You've got all these negative emotions bouncing around, but you've got a tendency to look for food to try and resolve emotional conflict. So now guess what? You're overeating even more, you're self-soothing even more, the snacking's more frequent. You don't even realize how many calories you consume. You stopped tracking 4 days ago. You stopped weighing then altogether. So that's out of sight, that's out of mind. You don't care because you're not weighing, but you do really care because you can feel it in yourself. You can feel your body changing. You can see how that is impacting you when you put your clothes on and when you're in the mirror. Eventually, check-in day comes around if you've got a coach, or a few weeks down the line, you finally realize, okay, I've got to put a stop to this. You jump on the scales and now you're 10 pounds up. That can happen quite quickly. Those things can spiral quite quickly. Will all of that 10 pounds gain be fat gain? Probably not. But you can see how this ends up being a vicious cycle if it's not addressed and accounted for early on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, Sean. When the reality is the start of that journey where you were just talking about, that individual had the initial, higher weight in, telling themselves that they've actually gained body fat. Whereas that, if they zoomed out a little bit there got some visuals. By visuals, I mean take some of your progress photos again, compare them, and most often than not, if you have somewhat stayed near to what you should be doing for your balance build, they're not going to look too dissimilar. And then you've got that confirmation of, oh, actually, no, it hasn't changed. So all of these things I'm telling myself because I've seen a high number of the scales. Maybe I'm feeling a bit more bloated today because, like you said earlier, Sean, I had a meal out last night. It was really salty and I had a really crappy sleep. So I'm really bloated today. Instead of living in that particular moment, that particular feeling, you're zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is there isn't really any body fat gain there. It's just how I'm feeling in the moment in my body. And sometimes when you just rely on that in that moment feeling, not sometimes, I'm going to argue that all the time when you just rely on that in the feeling moment in your body, that has such a high probability of you spiraling negatively. And if that keeps happening time and time again, that's where you end up in a tricky situation.
100%. This is my golden rule as a coach, right? When it comes to assessing changes in body composition, confirm with visuals. Write that down, make it a note on your phone, confirm with visuals. If you're seeing certain weight changes which you think are leading to body fat gain, or you think your clothes are tighter on you, or you think you're gaining fat too fast, confirm with visuals. I'm not talking like just go and take a look in the bloody mirror. I'm talking get progress pictures, put them side by side, and actually compare to see what you think you are seeing.
And I'd even add to that, take the photos, put them side by side, but also compare them once you've had time to just decompress from your emotional spike, and where you've kind of can go into it with a bit more of a rational mindset.
Or even better, share it with somebody that can look at these progress pictures objectively and tell you if there is a difference or not. Again, for clients that have coaches, these are what you want to share with your coach. Like, get them to look at them for you. It doesn't have to be on a set check-in period. We might say to our clients, we're going to do progress pictures every 6 to 8 weeks. But if I have a client that comes to me and expresses any sort of discomfort or dissatisfaction with their body at the moment, and I feel like they're genuinely concerned about this, then I get them to do progress pictures there and then on the spot.
Regardless of the outcome, right? You could avoid doing it, but regardless of the outcome, you want to know either A, nothing catastrophic is happening like my mind's telling me, or B, okay, maybe it is happening, but I want to nip this in the bud right now so it doesn't get any worse. Either outcome is you're in the know. And once you're in the know, you can make a plan of action and you can feel empowered again. Hiding and not facing that's where the danger zone really, really, really comes to life.
3 of my lot over the last 6 months have told me on a couple of occasions that they're feeling uncomfortable, they're feeling a bit more bloated. Their attitude was fantastic about this, actually, because the feedback was always, I'm feeling a little bit more bloated, I'm feeling a bit more uncomfortable, but I'm going to ride this one out. I'm going to stay patient. I'm going to stay true to the process. I could not encourage that enough to just try and get comfortable being uncomfortable in that building phase. It's normal, it's natural. As long as things haven't drifted too far and it's not going to leave you having to spend a ridiculous amount of time cutting your fat back down, or it's not making you feel really, really, really uncomfortable, like absolutely hating on yourself. We don't want it to get to that level. We don't want you to feel like you're failing on this, right? But I think some people are a little bit too quick to judge themselves negatively when they experience any sort of fat gain at all. But these members, right, they were saying, I do feel a bit uncomfortable. I do feel a bit more bloated. I do feel a bit more fluffy. I do think there's a bit of fat gain now. And to be fair to them, I'd look at their weight data. They've been on a building phase for 4 to 6 months at a time. We are seeing some increases in scale weight by this stage. So there's potential for there to be some fat gain there. Now, I do the progress pictures on a regular basis with my members. So I can spot that within a number of weeks if they've gained body fat. When I actually put those progress pictures side by side, start of your building phase to wherever they are now at this stage, and I put them side by side and I share them with them, I'm like, can you tell me where you're seeing this significant fat gain? Can you tell me where you're seeing it? And they can't, because it's not there. It's not visible. It's insignificant. And I've had this on so many occasions, male and female, 4 to 6 months at a time of building or longer, and you're just not seeing the fat gain. If anything, some of them may have been able to get away with a little bit more calories and potentially have a little bit more fat gain just to make sure that they're maximizing their muscle growth in that period. So confirm with visuals. I can't encourage it enough.
No, I agree. I think visuals are so important because mind can play tricks on you. It really, really can. And it's not even just that they play tricks on you. It has the potential to I guess sabotage the next steps of your journey, right? Because you're relying on a temporary feeling rather than the what's actually happening in that moment.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. In our scenario, this individual, you've looked at their weight data has been going up. You then confirm with visuals, and it does look like they've gained a little bit of body fat. I'm going to give you two potential scenarios off the back of this. So we know that if the individual hasn't gained much body fat, you can literally confirm it with them there and then and say, right, you're absolutely fine. What your experience is probably just day-to-day bloating and a little bit of inflammation, let's say, that's making you feel like you've gained a bit more fat than you have. You confirm with the visuals, you confirm with the progress pictures. They're happy, they're comfortable, and they're going to continue with their building phase, right? That's job done, problem solved. Let's move on. But let's say you have seen the progress pictures now, and there is some fat gain, and you would like to address this as a coach. You've got two potential scenarios now. So scenario one is the individual's gained a little bit of fat, but for you, looking at this as a coach, it's a reasonable amount of fat that they've gained. Scenario two is there's more fat than what you would have expected. So break those down for me. What do you do in those scenarios? So acceptable amount of fat gain, not so acceptable amount of fat gain. And how do you determine what's an acceptable amount of fat gain as well to some extent?
This will go down to very much individual basis. And there's no one size fits all. It would be having an honest and open conversation that, look, visually you can see there is some body fat gain. Going to remind you it's really not the be all end all, but how are you feeling in yourself right now? And that answer from that individual will determine the advice that I give them next. So let's start with option one, where there has been a little bit of body fat gain, but they've been in the balance build for 3 months now. As a coach, based on the data and how quickly they lose body fat, it's not really going to take them that long to lose what they've gained anyway, right? So you're comfortable with them carrying on with the build because it's really not going to impact their long-term journey an awful lot. So that individual may go there, okay, I understand it might mean I need to do a couple more weeks in a deficit. It's not really that detrimental to me. I'm okay, I can ride out this discomfort. Then I'll tell them to carry on with a balance build.
Okay. How would you get them to carry on with the balance build though? Because they've expressed that they're starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, right? So if they have gained some body fat and they carry on as they are, then they're only going to gain more body fat, and then that could leave them in a position where it creeps up towards the unacceptable for them level of body fat gained.
Mhm.
So how would you handle the next stage after that?
So it's either A, you carry on as you are and accept that you're going to gain a little bit more body fat over the next part of your build. And if you're not happy to accept that, then it's likely that you're consuming too many calories at the moment. So ask yourself honestly, are you being as accurate and honest with your nutrition as you possibly can? If you are, and you are tracking everything, then perhaps your calories are a little bit too high and we need to drop them down a little. But if you're not and you're just getting a little bit comfortable with your calories, more things are slipping into your diet without you really tracking, then just tighten up on that, because then you can just contain the amount of body fat that you gain over the next part of your balance build. And just to be clear with pulling back a little bit on your calories, this is if hand on heart, you are being honest with your nutrition, nil intake, and you can honestly say you're sitting at the maintenance calories set for yourself or by your coach. If you are, then it might mean that, say, for example, your maintenance is 2,300 right now, but you're gaining a little bit too much, then we might drop that down to 2,200. And see how you get on over the next couple of weeks. That's when I mean pull back a little bit if you are gaining more body fat than you'd like at the calories that you're on, because it might just be set a tiny bit too high.
We know from experience and we know from the literature that you're not going to gain much body fat at all if you're at maintenance calories. So if your calories are equal going out to what you've got coming in, I can't say you're not going to gain any body fat at all, but it's highly unlikely you're going to gain much. If you are gaining body fat, you're probably consuming a little bit more each day than what you're burning. And if you want to carry on with the build phase, but you don't want to risk gaining more fat, then you may just choose to go back to maintenance calories. So you're not necessarily going to lose out on any of the muscle building benefits, like the smallest possible amount, like really, really small amounts, but you will still be able to maintain a very similar level of body fat to where you are. It's not going to get worse over time, ideally. So I think that's a really viable strategy. I think that's an excellent option, to just pull back a little bit to maintenance calories.
Yeah, you don't always have to kind of hit the panic button and go back into a fat loss phase. I like to call it steadying the ship and just iron things out at that time. Yeah, pull back a little bit on your calories so that you can carry on building for another couple of months if that's what you would prefer to do.
Because you might not be ready for a full fat loss phase yet. It might not be the right time for you. You might not feel like you've got the head space for it to apply yourself to that. You might just want to keep building muscle and keep getting stronger for now. And you might be really enjoying that process, but you want to do it without as much fat gain. So yeah, putting back to maintenance, really smart. My second scenario I presented you with then was an individual that has gained a little bit too much fat. And I'm really throwing curveballs at you here, but I'm enjoying doing it. So I'm going to carry on. Let's imagine that individual has reached a level of body fat that they aren't happy with and they are genuinely uncomfortable with. And you can see that and in their progress picture. What do you offer to that individual as an option? And to make matters even harder for you, I'm going to say this individual does not want to do their cuts yet. They don't want to do a long-term fat loss phase yet. Got you thinking now, haven't I?
So again, this one, open and honest communication at the start. It's being real with where they're at, not pretending everything is okay because they're not feeling great in themselves. Being honest with what's happened, because if they don't like what's happened right now, they're not going to want to repeat that in the future. So it's really important to chat about that and why they've got to that position now, and what they can do about that differently in the future, because they're going to be going back to balance build at some point, right? They're not always easy conversations to have, I will be honest, because if someone's feeling that uncomfortable, they're not feeling great in themselves, right? And it's not nice to experience that with your clients. But I also think it's a really important conversation to have because it's really empowering, because that's the moment you've got to go, right, we can do something about this. You have the option to make changes here. But you mentioned this person doesn't want to go into a long-term fat loss phase, right? So that's off the cards. For whatever reason, there could be many different reasons going on in life that they don't want to do in a long-term fat loss phase. So you can't force something to fit that really isn't going to work for that individual, because if you're not all in on a fat loss phase, I'm going to put money on the fact you'll half-ass it, right? So there's no point doing it. Mini cut. I think using a mini cut, just trimming back a little bit of body fat, so you're back into a range where you're feeling a little bit more comfortable in yourself, proving to yourself again that, you're in control of your nutrition. Because from experience, if this individual has gained a bit too much body fat, a bit too quickly, it's likely that their relationship with their nutrition at that moment in time has perhaps gone a little bit more south than they'd like it to. So it's getting hold of those reins again and proving to yourself that actually, no, I can do this. I can and ring things in. I can really work on my habits and behaviors again, and then, carry on doing that after, when you go back into the building phase. It's an opportunity to strip back some body fat in the short term for a short-term fat loss phase. Could be a couple of weeks if you're doing an aggressive approach, and you could be dropped anywhere between, 4 to 10 pounds in that time frame.
Well, it's like in 3 weeks, you dropped what, 8 pounds?
Yes.
And based on the visuals, I would say at least half of that was fat.
And that makes a difference from you being comfortable or uncomfortable and carrying on with the build or not carrying on with the build. So not every time first of all, don't panic if you have regained that body fat, because it can happen. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just question what you're going to do to change it. And then it's okay to just do a little bit of a cut. You don't have to go into a long-term fat loss phase now and change your plan of action for the next couple of months massively. Just chip away a little bit of body fat so you can feel comfortable again, and then carry on.
Didn't really stitch you up very well there, Katie, because once again, that was superbly well explained.
If I reach like 100 grand now, is what's it on Chase, where you keep going up in the money levels? Am I a millionaire, Sean?
That's not how it works. Chase comes down. Is it? I don't know. Can't remember.
I can't remember how what Chase is. I just remember I just imagine me sitting on top of that thing going.
I just watched some clips on YouTube where they're trying to stitch Bradley up with questions he hasn't read out loud, and then starts laughing his head off because there's some sort of innuendo. But yeah, back to the point though. I think what you can take away from that segment, the only way you can really screw this up is if we go back to that scenario where you're the individual that emotionally eats after a small bit of discomfort, and you let that spiral on for months and months and months and months on end. There are so many ways where if you are in one of your first building phases, or even if you're not and you make a bit of a mistake and you start to gain fat a little bit too much quickly, there's so many ways to be able to correct for that, and so many options available to you without absolutely bashing yourself to pieces with a fat loss phase at a time in your life where you just don't want to do it, or without just completely going, oh, well, I give up. I've got fat. I'm now a failure. I'm just going to eat myself into oblivion. I messed up my last build phase. I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm going to admit it. I messed up my last build phase. Do you know why I messed up my last build phase? Because I got impatient. Now, did I mess it up that badly? No, I really didn't. I really, really didn't. But for my standards and for the outcome that I want from my body and my body fat level over a longer term basis, I gained a little bit too much fat towards the second half of my build phase over the last 9 months. Like I said, because I got impatient, because I wanted to see my weight push up a little bit quicker. I wanted to see the muscle mass come on a little bit quicker. And all it was a couple of weeks where my weight didn't go up as quickly. And then I thought, right, well, I probably need to bump my calories up again. So if I can mess up with my level of experience when I help clients literally maintain their weight within like 2 or 3 pounds for 6 to 9 months at a time, and I can still make a small mistake with my body fat levels, then most people that don't have that level of experience would be expected to make even more mistakes than this. But what difference is that going to make in the long term? Because the reality is, all I need to do to correct for this is literally just a couple more weeks of deficit. That's it. It's like 2 to 3 more weeks of deficit at most to correct for that extra fat gain, because it's not going to be that much. Hardly going to change the trajectory of my fitness journey. It's hardly going to ruin my body composition.
It's getting comfortable with it being a lifelong journey, isn't it? And not just, I've got to achieve this in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it may be. Your journey's going to be up and down. You're going to learn stuff. You go in to make mistakes. You're going to have some really plain sailing phases, and you're going to have some that are a little bit more tricky. Like what you said there, Sean, if you can make a mistake, a wrong call at your level of experience, then my gosh, the individuals that don't have the knowledge, because it's not your area of expertise, right? Just don't beat yourself up over it. It's going to happen. It's likely to happen, but you can adjust course. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in your own wants and biases sometimes. Like we discussed what happened at the end of your build phase quite a lot the last couple of days, haven't we? You shared your data with me and we've had a look through it. And it's quite simply, you're so hungry to build muscle. You knew your time was coming to the end of the build, going back into cut, and you wanted to eke out as much as you could. That's it.
And ironically, before I started this fat loss phase, I was hitting lifetime PBs in the gym. So my lifting numbers were the best they've ever been. My recovery was fantastic. My training performance felt amazing. My energy levels were really good. I was actually really enjoying my sessions. I was actually smashing it in the gym. I was probably in a really good place hormonally. So for the extra bit of body fat that I gain, visually, okay, maybe not the look that I really would like to have in the long run and maintain it all year round, but in terms of how I was feeling, in terms of how I was performing, as good as ever. So you've got to weigh things up sometimes. Does it make it better or worse that I've gained that little bit of extra fat? And even if I did gain a bit more fat than what I perhaps would have liked in an ideal world, it's much quicker to get back off again than people realize.
I think once you've got the experience with the tools that are available and you've got the trust in yourself to follow through with whatever tool you choose to use, that's when these mistakes or mishaps happen on your journey don't really impact you mentally or negatively, because it's like, oh, okay, this has happened, but I know how I'm going to write it. These are the other benefits that I had from it. But I think it's hard to rationalize that sometimes when you're new to the journey, because it can feel like a really big deal that that's happened. But that experience actually is also really, really valuable.
Imagine like you're watching a movie, and at the start of the movie, you get introduced to a hero. And at the end of the movie, it's all about how the hero has been successful on their quest, successful on their journey. You know, they're immortalized by this legacy that they've left. And, you know, every worldwide, globally, this hero is recognized for the incredible features of what they've done on this particular quest or throughout their lifetime, whatever. The whole movie in the build-up is going to involve so many different segments where the hero messes up, makes mistakes, does something wrong, makes a bad decision, makes a bad call, gets beaten up by something. They go through all of that rubbish, and then they arrive at the end of the quest, and they're still a hero. It sometimes makes them even more of a hero, the fact that they've been through so much adversity to get to that level in the end. Like, if it was just plain sailing, it wouldn't make much of a story, would it? It wouldn't be much of an accomplishment. It wouldn't feel like they deserve the status of somebody that's achieved some incredible features. So you need to use that mentality with yourself. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you make mistakes in the middle sections. It doesn't matter how many times you get things wrong, as long as you end up at the outcome. Sometimes it might take you a little bit longer than expected. Fair enough. Sometimes it might take a little bit more work than expected. Sometimes it might, like, I'm having to drop my calories down now on my third cycle of the aggressive diet because I want to try and accelerate the result a little bit further. I don't want to drop my calories down for my third cycle at this stage. If I was planned correctly, I should be putting my calories up a little bit now. And I should have been starting more aggressive and building back up again, so that as I get deeper into the diet, it doesn't feel quite so hard, but I'm having to drop them down now. So be it. I have to go through a little bit more adversity to get to that outcome. But as long as I get to the outcome in the end, nobody's going to give a shit about what you do wrong in the middle, as long as you get there eventually. And that's the mentality you should have.
And you also won't give a shit about the mistakes you've made in the middle afterwards either. And I can put money on that. You'll actually go, I'm proud of it. I actually feel like do you know what? I bloody done that myself. Yeah, I made a mistake, but look how I handle it. Look where I'm at now. No one's ever regretted that mistake. They only ever regret letting that mistake dictate their future.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Katie. And that is the caveat I would give to that. You will regret your mistakes and you will give a shit about your mistake if you don't correct for them and you don't keep going and learn from those mistakes. If you just try and ignore them, if you just bury your head in the sand, if you pretend those mistakes didn't happen, then you're actually doing the opposite. That is where that mistake ends up being a long-term thing. That mistake does have an impact on your ability to achieve the outcome you want and the future you want. We've said many times on this podcast in previous episodes that you should move on from past mistakes. You should forgive yourself for the mistakes you make and you should look to right those mistakes. We don't mean you do nothing with the mistake and just ignore that it ever happened in the first place and not learn anything or take anything away. If you give up every time you make a mistake, you'll never get it.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
And that will make you give a shit because then you will feel like a failure and you will feel like the person that can't face hard stuff and adversity.
Your confidence, your self-esteem, you can watch that plummet then. And that's not a happy, healthy person when all of that's been shattered.
You don't feel like a hero if it's all easy the whole way through. And you don't feel like a hero if you stop at the first hurdle on the first challenge. There's no hero stories written about somebody that give up on week one. So just remind yourself of that.
Be your hero.
And if you want to be your own hero, and you don't know how to correct for your own mistakes because you're not quite sure, how to identify them to begin with. You might not be comfortable looking at data like myself and KTR. You might not have a bloody clue what to do with the data because there were times in the past where we wouldn't have had a clue what to do with the data. Or perhaps we were so absolutely shattered in the middle of our fat loss phase that we look at the data and we just can't make any sense of it anyway. This stuff happens. It's the same with training progress. It's the same with training performance. You don't know what you're looking for at times, even when you're experienced, because you might be caught up in the emotional side of what you're doing. Unless you've had these mistakes pointed out to you in the past, then you're not going to know how to look for them and you won't be able to identify them because it's hard to actually recognize something that you don't know exists. If you find yourself in that scenario where your goal is to try and build muscle, but you feel like you're not getting the visual results you're looking for, you're gaining a little bit too much fat, you start to feel more uncomfortable than you should be. You're not seeing as much muscle as you'd like to gain, but you're seeing more fat gain relative to how much muscle mass you're gaining, then reach out to one of us. There's an inquiry form in the description. Fill that in. Let us know your circumstances. Let us know your scenario. Chat to one of us in person, and we will find a way for you to move forwards with this without feeling really uncomfortable with yourself. We'll choose the best option that you have available. Like we've discussed here, it could be that we start with a mini cut to remove a bit of the fat before we build forward. It could be that we set you back to maintenance calories. It could be that simply your training is just not as effective as it needs to be to stimulate the muscle growth you need. Whatever the scenario is, whatever challenge you're facing, we can figure this out together and we'll present you with the best course of action for you to move forward and feel like you're getting the results out of this process that you deserve.
100%. Get yourself down to that description and fill in that inquiry form. We can't wait to hear from you. My turn to throw a scenario your way then, Sean Darrell.
I'm out of all my good ideas now.
Well, you better dig deep because there's a scenario coming your way.
Is there any of that coffee left?
Client has been doing a balanced build phase for around 6 months. Most of their numbers have been going up in their program, but there's a couple of lifts that appear to have stalled for a long time. Same weights, same reps every week. What do you do?
As expected, this is going to start with a combination of communication and looking at data, right? It's where I'd always start with any of these issues. So let's ask the client first about the exercise itself, because this can often reveal a lot. So why does that client think it's stalled? Now, we keep a really close eye on whatever our clients are doing in the gym. We get their lifting videos, we have all their data from their training sessions, they report how hard they found the exercises, they leave us notes. We get the regular check-ins from them. So we're pretty clued up on this stuff anyway. But sometimes there might be a certain exercise, and I find this a lot of the time, where there might be certain exercises which clients don't particularly like or they're not particularly getting a good response from, and they go quiet about those exercises. So this is an opportunity for me to ask them about it, find out what they think is going on. Because sometimes that conversation alone reveals what the problem is. I'll give you some examples. Are they putting as much effort into that exercise itself? If it's an exercise which they've lost enjoyment in, or they find it really faffy to set up, or they don't feel like they're performing it very well, or they feel really self-conscious doing it, they're not very engaged with that movement. They don't feel their muscles working, so they just can't be bothered performing it to a high standard, or they're not incentivized to perform it to a high standard and put a lot of effort in, then that could be the reason why it stalls. Is it an exercise towards the back end of their program where they get to that exercise, they're really fatigued, so they just kind of go through the motions with it? they half-arse it a little bit, maybe that's why it's stalled. So I think there's a lot that can be gained just from the initial conversation about why do you think this exercise has got stuck where it is?
I agree, because sometimes you get the, "Well, I don't really like it," or "I'm not really confident performing it." And that alone is enough to hold back progress in a lift, right? Because the likelihood that you're pushing yourself on that particular lift is very slim because you've got a bit of disconnect with it.
This is where a lot of coaches will disagree with one another. Enjoyment of performing exercise matters a great deal, in my opinion. I think it's one of the most important aspects of training consistently and training with a high degree of effort consistently. I think it's unrealistic to expect to enjoy every single exercise and every single set and every single session that you do, right? But more often than not, there needs to be some form of enjoyment. And whilst there will be exercises that you don't enjoy in your program, there's only so long you can continually show up and continually work hard in an exercise that you absolutely hate. So for me, first and foremost, when I ask about enjoyment in exercises, is this down to something that I can help to influence, be it helping the client to improve their technique, giving them some advice on how to set it up so it's more manageable for them, so it's less faffy, so it's less logistically constraining? Or is it just simply an exercise that they just don't like? Is it going to make that much of a deal if I change this exercise for an alternative? That's the question I have to ask as a coach. And that's the question which I'd often encourage most people to reflect upon. Is it going to make that much of a difference if they ask to change from a cable exercise to a dumbbell exercise, or a particular machine to a free weight exercise? 9 times out of 10, it's not going to make that much of a difference, especially if by changing the exercise to one they prefer, they're going to work harder in it. They're going to be able to take it closer to failure. They're going to enjoy it more. They're going to maybe do extra reps and extra sets in future as a result of having one of their favorite exercises in their program. I think that's one of the most lowest hanging fruits you can get.
I agree with you. And that is often the first point of call I'll always ask is, are you enjoying this? And it's not the be all end all, right? Because sometimes an individual does need to be encouraged to push through an exercise they're not quite confident in. And they'll get more back from doing that than removing the exercise. So there's always a scenario where I think that is appropriate as well.
I agree. It's not black and white, is it?
It's really not. It's really not, because there are some individuals that I know will get so much more back from going, okay, I've actually nailed that exercise now, and I really didn't like it before. But for a lot of people, to push through an exercise, they're just like, oh, I've had a tit for this. I hate setting it up. It's always busy. I can't get equipment. I just don't like how it feels anymore. I used to, but I've just done it for so long now. I've just
Yes.
not enjoyed it. Then there is no point flogging a dead horse there.
Switch it up.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think the time frame and the duration is a big one as well. Like if they've done it for like 6 to 8 weeks and they're like, right, I've stopped enjoying it now, then they've already given it a really good go. You might have seen some full videos. You might help them with their technique. They might be setting it up just fine. They might have just had enough of it. Well, just switch it out then. You don't need to be difficult about it. And I think a lot of coaches, I've had so many clients, I've worked with coaches that are like this. They set them a program for 8 weeks and they don't change any of it. If a client hates an exercise, if they're having a nightmare setting it up, if they can never get on the equipment, if it's taking them 15 minutes waiting for that equipment every session, and then when they finally get on it, they just don't enjoy it because they're so stressed and they're so worked up. But the coach won't change it. She'll be like, well, tough, get on with it. And I'm just like, that says so much more about the coaching than it does about the client. It really does. Like, that's just really poor coaching. Like, that's just poor service, in my opinion. I'd rather just change it to another exercise that's more accessible that the client's going to get done. And they might even get another exercise done after that exercise as a result, and overall have more benefit to their physique overall because they're able to do more training overall in that session because they're not wasting time sitting around for a piece of kit which they then hate using. I don't know.
That's the benefit of a highly personalized program, all right?
Absolutely. The point was, sorry, I'm getting ranty here already. The duration thing, right? So if you've got a client that's within their first few weeks of having a new exercise in their program, I'd probably be more inclined to try and get them to do it for a bit longer. So, oh, I've done it once, I hate it. I've done it twice, I hate it. It's like, okay, well, maybe let's have a look at why you hate it. What's really affecting you with this? You know, is it a nervousness thing? Is it a setup thing? Is it a discomfort with the performance? Is it how you're positioning your body and how you're working your muscles in that exercise that's stopping you from getting more enjoyment out of this? Because I've also had the reverse scenario where a client's not liked an exercise in the first 2 weeks of their program, they've kept it, and it's ended up being one of their favorite things ever.
Oh, absolutely. And I've had that many a time. It's from that beginner unknown stage to being able to perform it really smooth, effectively, and you actually feel like pretty good doing it. It then becomes like, oh, actually, I really love this.
So that's the enjoyment component anyway. So the takeaway from that is you investigate further So if you're not enjoying an exercise, why aren't you enjoying it? Can you find a solution for the reasons why you aren't enjoying it? And if it's just that the exercise has gone stale or it's just really putting you off the rest of your session, then can you choose an exercise that's pretty much as effective? In most cases, the answer would be yes for that, for most exercises you can do in the gym. And even if it's not quite as effective, if you enjoy another exercise more and you're gonna turn up to the sessions more and have more of a positive attitude about those sessions, then it may be worth even switching it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can have a big impact on progression stalling,
Yeah,
right? So that
absolutely.
could be why this person who's been doing it in the balance for 6 months could have stalled. What else, Sean? If it's nothing to do with enjoyment of an exercise, what else would you look at?
I mentioned about fatigue going into it. So this is where ordering the exercises can be useful, or reordering the exercises can be useful. If an exercise is frequently performed fourth, fifth, or sixth exercise in the workout, and that's not progressing very much, then it may be warranted to move that exercise earlier on in that workout. So an example of this that I see a lot of the times with some of the members that do full body splits is that they might choose big lifts at the start of their sessions that involve a lot of muscle groups together. So squat based movements, hinge based movements, chest presses, shoulder presses, rows, etc. They'll go towards the start of the workout, which makes sense to do those before you're fully fatigued. But eventually, there's going to be a movement that's later on in the session that perhaps is performed with a little bit more general fatigue buildup from the earlier exercises in the session, and that movement might not progress quite as much as a result of where it is in that workout. So, if it's a muscle group that we want to try and progress a bit more, and if it's a muscle group that's just not progressing, I might move that a little bit earlier on in the workout. So, I might put some of the upper body lifts before the lower body lifts, for example. What's important to consider here is you want to think about which muscle groups you want to progress with the most in terms of strength and muscle building. And those should be closer to the start of your session, ideally, if you want to achieve more progress with them. But also consider what's to follow. Because if you want to build your chest, your shoulders, and your triceps, for example, you don't really want to be doing a tricep pull down into a shoulder press, into a chest press, because you're fatiguing the same muscle consecutively in those lifts. So your triceps get fatigued in the first lift, your shoulders get fatigued in the second lift. By the time you got to your chest press, you've already got fatigued triceps and shoulders, which are probably going to fail in that lift before you really fully fatigue the chest. So if that's the case, you might want to put other exercises in between or order it in a way that that muscle gets a little bit of recovery before you go back to other muscle. Or better yet, maybe split those lifts up on separate days. Each time you train those muscle groups, they are fresh. They're not fatigued by other movement. I try and make sure that the individual is as fresh as possible with performing movement that involve muscle groups that potentially need a little bit more attention or have stalled.
Mm. That makes sense. And it's mad to think sometimes that even just the order of a session can impact that. And I've seen it firsthand. It really can. Just shuffling, say if someone stalled on dumbbell chest press, for example, and at the moment it's maybe their third or fourth exercise in the session, just switching that up to either exercise 1 or 2, depending what else is in that session. 3 weeks, the numbers are going back up.
I've done it with your sessions, Katie.
Yeah,
I've,
yeah.
I've moved certain lifts in your sessions and I've put them earlier on in the session where I've wanted you to get a little bit quicker progress, or you've said to me, "Oh, I'm getting stuck with this one. I haven't progressed in this one for a couple of weeks." I'm like, "Cool, I'll just move it further up the workout." And sometimes that's all it takes. That's enough.
Yeah, I don't like stalling. So yeah, I definitely, I'm like, excuse me, what can we done yet?
Yeah, the problem is though that you're the type of person where you'd want every single exercise at the start of your session, and that's impossible because you don't want anything to stall that.
Me all again.
Every single one of them. But there we are. That's again another consideration for another time. But just to touch upon it briefly, this is why I like to think of like priority areas rather than you're going to try and progress everything, right? But be realistic. You can't progress everything at the same rate all at the same time. There's not enough time available for that. There's fatigue that needs to be considered as a constraint to being able to do that. So you sometimes have to consider, right, which muscle groups, and I normally would say maximum of 3 per training phase, which muscle groups do I want to maximally progress in this phase? And you do have to accept that some of the other muscle groups might not progress as quickly because they're either not performed at the start of your session, or they're not being performed as frequently, or they haven't got as much volume. So when I talk about volume, I mean, how many sets per week are you performing for that muscle group? If you've got a priority area, let's say like the chest, then you might not progress as much in that training phase in some of your back work because you might be doing more sets of chest work. And that's sometimes something that you have to accept as well. You can rejig that later on in another training phase when you feel like you've achieved the appropriate progress that you want in your muscle group that's a priority area. And you can then work on one of the muscle groups that wasn't a priority in a previous phase.
I think it's important to note the priorities actually, because it can allow you to accept sometimes when progress is a little slower in certain movement. Like, for example, with my shoulder press trickles up, but is what it is, right? It's a slow progression. But I don't want to do more shoulder press to try and see that creep up higher right now, because there's other movements I wouldn't want to take out to replace it. So even though I don't like accepting slow progress, sometimes you have to accept slow progress. It doesn't mean that it's not working, doesn't mean you're not progressing as you should. It simply just means for you to push past that, you're going to have to put more focus on it. And are you willing to put more focus on it? If you're not, then you've just got to accept that is what it is for that phase.
Sometimes it's time availability, isn't it? More generally equals more with training. If you can do more sets, if you can do more exercises for a muscle group, it's going to grow more. It's probably going to get stronger quicker. But time is always a constraint. So in Katie's example, for her to be able to get more progress in her shoulder press, she would need more work of shoulder press. And that would mean that something else has to give, or she has to spend more time in the gym, which isn't possible for her right now. So sometimes you have to make compromises with time. And it may be the case that your shoulder press doesn't go up as quickly as perhaps it could if you had more time spent on it. But you accept also that that's still not the best option for you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just knowing that it's empowering rather than thinking, well, it's not working. So if I end out any potential fatigue, accumulation, reordering the exercises to get the most out of it, is there anything else you could look at or consider to help with helping you coaching it?
Yeah, so I've spoken about a lot of the training programming sort of elements, like the logistical elements so far. It might be the case that the exercise that is stalled is already in a good spot in the training program and the client is really enjoying it and it's just not progressive. My attention would then turn to how the movement is being performed. Generally speaking, if a muscle is growing, it's capable of producing more force and it's going to provide more strength. You're going to see that progression in terms of numbers and strength in the gym, right? If you're performing an exercise with technique that doesn't maximally recruit the muscle that you're trying to work and doesn't allow you to stimulate the muscle you want to work as much as possible to grow, then you're going to struggle to see progress in the lift that is predominantly designed to work that muscle. So looking at the training videos of how that client is performing can help a lot when it comes to seeing why this lift isn't progressing. Because it could be some technical issues. It could be that they're not setting it up well enough to be able to work the target muscle as much as possible, and other muscles are doing the work. And they're going to be limited then by the fact that this is not mechanically performed as well as it should be. I also think looking at training videos gives me a really good idea of how hard the client is training in that set. So if I'm watching a training video and the first rep of the set looks exactly the same as the last rep, like it hasn't slowed down, there's no further strain on the individual's face, there's no change of expression, they're not fighting to maintain good technique as it starts to get harder, then I know that that set isn't being taken close to failure. So that could be one of the reasons why the lift isn't progressing, because they're not training close enough to failure to stimulate the muscle growth in order to be able to lift more weight with the muscle in future. So training videos can reveal a lot. And I think I'm quite good, and I do this, and my members will tell you about this. If I see something on their training program that's got a bit of a question mark, so if I see like for 4 weeks in a row, they've been lifting the same weight for the same number of reps, all across the same number of sets, I will ask them for a training video because I want to see what they're doing in that exercise. And 9 times out of 10, there's something that can be improved. And then once that improvement is made, the numbers start going up.
Absolutely.
Probably important to note at this stage as well, Katie, that sometimes the numbers have to go backwards before they go forward.
Tell me more about that.
Sometimes to make technical adjustments, you will have to reduce the load in order to find the optimal technique. But what this does over time is it enables you to target the muscle you really want to work and think of this like a long-term investment rather than a short-term investment. You start working the muscle you really want to work. This might make the numbers go down initially. You might have to lift less weight, or you might have to reduce the amount of reps you perform. But then when you're progressing over time, you get more consistent progress over time rather than it get to this point where it's stalled. But the reason why it's stalled is because other muscles are working harder than they should be, but this isn't the best way to target those muscles in that lift in terms of the positioning and the mechanic and the leverage. All of that is complex biomechanic stuff, but essentially, if you reduce the load and that allows you to lift with better technique and you're better targeting muscle growth, then over time that muscle will be getting stronger more directly and allow you to do more with it in the future.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think sometimes a lot of people can see dropping down in weight as a failure, but actually it's not always, because if you're stuck at a certain range of motion, for example, with a heavier load, because you can't actually put your limbs or your body in the position it needs to reach a full stretch or reach a full range of motion for that particular movement, then you're always going to kind of hit that sticking point. Whereas if you can just drop down for a couple of weeks and expose the muscle to a full range of motion, expose it to a full stretch, then you're going to give it the best opportunity to have more stimulus and targeted to that particular muscle, which then will lead to more growth, which then will lead to more opportunity for more strength. So sometimes that step back can actually propel you 5 steps forward. Very good angle. And I think that's an angle that a lot of people would not see as a wise move, would see it as a backward step. So I think that's a nice approach to point out, actually. But now, what if that client has great technique, good range of motion, you can't spot anything in their technique at all, right? They're spot on. You're like, you know what? I'm literally picking apart here something that doesn't need to be picked apart because they're performing really well. Then what you do?
Oh, you're really working hard to try and catch me out here, aren't you?
Oh, I'm trying my best, Alan.
So I've reordered the exercises to the best point in their session. So they're not carrying too much fatigue going into them. Technique is locked in. It's in a really good place. We're working the muscles as much as we want to work them. The only thing left for me to change is the total amount of work that's being done. This is no longer a quality issue. This is no longer an enjoyment or an effort issue. This now comes down to, sorry to say it, you just need to do a little bit more work. Now, this is the scenario where I think it's actually great to get to this place. I think that this is because this means that you're doing all you can be doing to push this muscle along as much as you can and to progress this exercise as much as you can. But essentially, what we know from the data is that if you're doing more sets per week, per muscle group, or per exercise, you're going to get better progress. So with that being the case, I would then just look to add more sets or some more work done. And the biggest limiter to this will be time. So it's again having that conversation. If this is a target muscle group and we want to prioritize it, then something else may have to give. I may consider using some time efficient strategies here to give you more volume. So I might consider using stuff like some drop sets in order to really try and overcome that plateau. It could be the case that I just throw in a few extra sets of this particular exercise at other times in the week if it's hit a plateau. But generally speaking, when you get to this point to build a particular muscle, the only way that you're going to get it to progress a bit more and to grow a bit more, other than just waiting it out and hoping that eventually you get stronger, is by just exposing it to more stimulus. So that's where you add additional work to be done. And Katie, this worked really well with you, didn't it? I think it was the chest press.
Yes, it was chest press. And I was wondering if you were going to remember this scenario. I thought, will I stump him here? But you have remembered. Yeah, it was dumbbell chest press where I was stuck on. I think it was in my last building phase, wasn't it? I was just stuck on either 24s or 26s. I can't really remember which one it was now. I think it's 26s. I'm back down to 24s at the moment. Where I was just kept doing the same 5 reps over and over and over and over again. And I was like, this is really, really annoying. Because they weren't even feeling like they were getting easier. It was just the same hard 5 reps every week. And I believe from memory, you dropped me back down for set 2 and 3 to 24 kilos or whatever the lower weight goes down.
They were back down sets.
Yes, to try and increase a little bit more volume to complete more reps. And then you also added in a 4th set, but that was push-ups. Until failure, which I was crying a little bit about. And then I cried a little bit more when I had to finish that off with partials at the end. Talk about belly flopping in the middle of the
Dumbbell section.
dumbbell section. Yeah, I couldn't think what it was called then. It was very much I can't go no more. Oh my God, it flopped like a fish.
What happened to your chest press?
Then the lift started going up.
It broke the plateau.
It did break the plateau. Looks like I needed a little bit more muscle mass there, right, to get a bit stronger.
Yeah, and look, some of the muscles that you store with are quite small muscle groups, so they do take a while to build the muscle to progress. Areas like the shoulders and the chest, particularly for females, you don't naturally have as much muscle mass in those areas. So it does take a bit longer sometimes to see progress with those lifts. The jumps aren't as significant either. Sometimes, if you think about it, you going up 2 kilograms in a lift that you're lifting within the 20 kilogram range, it's about a 10% increase, just below 10% increase each time. So that's quite a large increase to go up to that next dumbbell up. What I identified with Katie was she had one really good set in her where she was able to do 5 really high quality reps, but then on the second and third set, she wasn't going to be able to get 5 reps of those, and she's probably going to fail on 4 or 3. And I wanted her to try and take those chest muscles a little bit further than just 3 or 4 reps for those sets. And also, there's a psychological component where, like, if you're failing on 5 reps and you know you've got to lift again, you're going to fail on 4 or 3. Like, that makes you feel quite defeated at times. It makes you feel like every single set's going to be an absolute grind because those lifts are going to feel really, really heavy. So, doing the back down sets allowed her to then just get a few more reps out, feel like the weight's a little bit lighter, take that muscle to failure on those sets, and then to get more volume in for the chest in a time efficient manner. Because I could have given Katie something like a cable fly there to try and really isolate and target the chest. Or I could have given her, some pec deck flies or some dumbbell flies even to try and directly target the chest to get that to grow a little bit more. She already had plenty of triceps in her program. She had shoulder presses in her program, and they were looking fine numerically. They were progressing. I wasn't thinking she needs to build those extra muscles. I was thinking she needs to build the target muscle that she's working mostly in this exercise. So to save time, to not give her an extra exercise, she had to do some extra push-ups on the end. So as soon as she finished her last set of dumbbell press, down on the ground, and then I even got her to do partial reps of push-ups to failure. So
Yeah,
for
they were
those,
brilliant.
for those who don't know what these are, she does full push-ups until the point where she can't do any more push-up. And then she's literally just doing the bottom half of the push-up because there's still strength in the chest in that range of motion. The triceps will fatigue at the top end. So you won't be able to do full push-ups because you won't be able to fully extend the arms and finish that lift. But there's still a bit of work in the chest. So that's where the partials come in.
I wanted to absolutely max out the work my chest was doing, right?
And that's exactly what she did. And as a result, she built a bit more muscle a little bit more quickly, which then allowed her chest press to increase again. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Goes beyond just lifting some weights for some reps, for some sets a week, right?
That's what everyone wants to do, isn't it? Let's be honest. That's what everyone wants to do. I can honestly say I love that stuff. I I love looking at those possible scenarios and problem solving. That makes me feel alive. It's one of my favorite parts of being a coach is working out what I can change, what levers do I pull to make the best path forward for this individual and to make something progress that wasn't progressing before. I absolutely love that stuff. I can nerd out on that stuff all day. And I hope that passion comes across when I'm talking about this as well. But I completely get it that most people probably wouldn't give a shit about that. They just want to build muscle. They just want to get stronger. They don't want to have to deal with all the logistics and all the complication. That's what I'm here for because I'm sad enough to love that stuff.
You really do love it. Like, really do love it. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy it too, but you light up at this stuff. And I've learned so much of my training knowledge from you. And I always bounce off any kind of problems that I can't quite figure out myself. I'll always go, XYZ, Sean, what would you do? And there's always a number of options, and that's what I love about it because there's more than one way to fix a solution. Like you just said with my dumbbell chest press, right? You could have a different client that may absolutely despise press up, and that wouldn't be the right thing for them. But there's always another way to fix a solution, and I think that's why you love this so much. Is because it's that problem-solving element that you can go, oh my gosh, it's like there's this. Let's give this a go. Let's see how you respond to this. But yeah, you are very, very, very good at that when it comes to training programming. It's like you've got this brain that just holds this massive capacity of everything and anything to do with training that you can just pluck out whenever you need it.
It is my nerd topic, isn't it? You know, like when you see people do like these quiz shows and they just got the most obscure quiz topics, like where they're just like, how are you a specialist in this? Like artists from Edinburgh in the 60s. Why is that? But training is my area of interest like that. I just do really enjoy it. But yeah, it doesn't mean I'm going to throw push-ups to you every time your chest press plateaus, but it might be on the cards depending on your current scenario. I think I've given a thorough enough solution to your challenging client scenario, Katie.
I think I have to agree. And I'm gutted I haven't stumped you. Maybe in a future podcast that will happen.
Let's see.
I'll always try. I'll always endeavour. But we'll see.
We shall see indeed. But that's all for this one, guys. We hope you enjoyed listening. As we mentioned, if you've listened to any of these scenarios and you've been thinking, my God, I want to have all this stress and pressure taken away from me, I'd much rather have somebody look at this and provide me with the options that I can take to move forward while supporting and guiding you through the process, then head to the description. The inquiry form is there. Drop us a message if you want to on Instagram as well. We'll talk you through all the options you have available. You can choose whether it's myself or Katie. If you've got no preference, then just hit the inquiry form and we'll work out the best coach for you based on our skill sets and our experience. You've got absolutely nothing to lose. There's zero pressure.
You can gather the information that you need from us about how coaching works, how it can fit into your lifestyle, the cost of it, what investment it's going to cost you. So you can then go away, take your time, have a think about it, and make sure that it's the right fit for you.
Well said.
And next week's going to be an interesting topic, right? It's a very hot topic in the fitness space right now. And considering we're now 30, Sean, I turned 32 2 weeks ago.
Oh, sad.
You're coming up to 33 soon, right? September time. I'll always have that one on you. Just slightly bit
Oh,
younger.
yeah, just conveniently drift away from the fact that you turned 32 a couple of weeks ago and talk about my birthday in a few months.
But we're past our prime, right?
Absolutely not.
Now, we're going to discuss whether it's all downhill for body composition from the age 30 onward, and whether your metabolism is the true reason why you're carrying more body fat than you'd like.
Oof, that's a biggie.
It is a biggie. Metabolism gets thrown around left, right, and centre, doesn't it, in the health and fitness world? So it's definitely not an episode to miss. Thanks for listening. See you next time.